Hello and welcome to The Arise interview. 60 minutes of big questions about the big stories from the news and beyond, with fresh insight and critical analysis. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next hour, if there is one woman in Nigeria who has raised her voice to change the world, it is Adebukola Comfort Shonibare, popularly known as Bukky Shonibare. She's the founder of Girl Child Africa, CEO She TV, coordinator Adopter Camp, coordinator Church 2 Movement, and CEO 555 Consulting Limited. As if that isn't enough, she's also one of the founders of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, has recently qualified as a lawyer with first-class honors, and is a peace and security expert, not to mention a passionate human rights advocate. Tonight, we take a look at Bukky Shonibare, one woman who has left her mark on the campaign for girls and women's rights in Nigeria. In a moment. Now, if there's one woman in Nigeria who deserves recognition for the amazing work she's done and is doing to change social opinions and stereotypes, improve human rights, and shape the future of Nigeria for the better, it would have to be the lawyer, human rights activist, women rights advocate, lecturer and consultant Bukky Shonibare. For most of the last decade, she has been at the forefront of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, becoming one of the most recognizable faces of that pressure group and its international push for the release of the kidnapped Chibok girls and for women's rights across Nigeria. And now, with one of the Dapchi girls, Leah Sharibu, still in captivity, Ms. Shonibare has continued her crusade, never giving up the fight to mobilize global support for Leah's freedom, as well as for truth, justice and equal rights. Well, in a moment, we'll examine the life less ordinary of Bukky Shonibare. But first, here she is talking about why she campaigns for human rights.
Adopter Camp started when we realized that those that have been affected by the insurgency in the northeastern part of Nigeria are not just the abducted Chibok girls. There were others in communities that have been affected, and there were others who I later found out are called internally displaced persons who have been displaced from where they used to know as home. So we started Adopt a Camp as a way of reaching out to those set of people, providing an holistic support. We went to Yola first, sometime in 2015 to do a needs assessment. And then we realized that there was, a four-pronged approach to the kind of intervention that they need in terms of health, education, economic empowerment, and basic necessities. So we started supporting IDP camps, particularly in the Northeast in this regard. But down the line, we decided to focus more on education, such that bulk of the funds that come to us actually go into educational intervention.
And I'm delighted to say that Bukky Shonibare joins me now in the studio. Very, very honored to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming in, and thank you for the work that you're doing. We're going to get to the broader strokes of what you're doing with education, with girls' rights and all that sort of thing. But first of all, your reaction to this latest flurry of activities around the continued captivity of Leah Sharibu, the young lady who was abducted from the school in Dapchi and has now been in captivity for 2 years.
I think first it is unfortunate that abduction happened. Unfortunate to the extent that the Chibok abduction had earlier happened. And one would expect that a nation that prioritizes the well-being of children and the vulnerable members of the society would take lessons from first the abduction of the Chibok girls, the dynamics that played out, how it was wrongly managed at the beginning and then, festered for so long, such that it became quite difficult for us to rescue them. I mean, today makes it 1,237 days since the Chibok girls were abducted, and 112 of them are still not yet back. And then years down the line, the Chibok girls abduction happened April of 2014. And then in 2018, when that 4-year gap, when we should have learned lessons, put mechanisms and processes in place in our schools to make sure that there is no repeat of Chibok girls abduction. We didn't do that, and then the unfortunate abduction of the Dapchi girls happened. So my reaction to it often is the disappointment in us as a people. And when I say us as a people, I'm referring to government, and I'm referring to us. We easily move on from issues, and we believe that once we make noise about something, 2-3 days down the line, it should legitimately be unpacked. But when we are dealing with situations like this, we don't just move on. We make sure that we keep calling for actions that would not just prevent a reoccurrence, but ensure those girls are brought back, and ensure that we put back into the society a sense of confidence and trust in the architecture that we have to protect people. So I'm disappointed that 2 years on, Leah is still in abduction. I'm disappointed that we keep reacting to the issue. We only get statements when an issue has happened. The last major statement we got from the presidency was when the news came out that Leah purportedly now has a child. And that was when we got another promise, we are going to bring her back, and yet another one this time. I don't think we should be a people that operates like that.
So you think that the government, and specifically the presidency, tends to be reactionary and not proactive when it comes to matters such as these?
Yes, I think the government is largely reactionary. And even before the abduction of the Dapchi girls, when you look at the Chibok girls issue, it is during milestone days or milestone events. Even though Bring Back Our Girls, kept calling that, these girls should be brought back, but it's either maybe on 1 year anniversary, 2 year anniversary, or when the parents come out and cry again, or when they're in the news. Or I think that the government needs to get to the point where it understands that things are not the way they used to be. We now operate in a different system. And when permit me to bring in international humanitarian law here that governs the rules of war and conflict, where we know that we no longer have conflict that has to do with nations, where Nigeria is fighting with Cameroon, for instance. We no longer have international armed conflict. We now have what in IHL we call non-international armed conflict, where conflicts are within the state. And then, so when conflicts are within, let's say, Borno State, for instance, we know there is high likelihood that it will spread to other parts. It spreads first to that, particular region and to other parts of Nigeria. The government needs to understand these changing dynamics, and we as a people must begin to see effort of the government that shows that they do not only understand these changing dynamics, but that they are planning. We shouldn't wait for a coronavirus, for instance, before we begin to put measures in place.
The government, though, would say that they are doing things. They just don't go out and sort of bleat about it to the public. They always talk about national security and security issues around what they're doing. I mean, for instance, it was reported recently that arrangements had been made or nearly concluded to pay some sort of a ransom for the release of Leah Sharibu. I think that was reported last week or something. But as the deal was nearing its conclusion, the militants apparently pulled out of that deal. Is that encouraging for you?
It's not. It's not encouraging. What makes sense to me and to many Nigerians is action. And by action, I mean positive action, positive results. So we keep hearing, and this is not the first time I'm hearing a similar story like this. I heard it 2 years ago after the abduction. We are doing something. What will make sense is when we have results.
No, I understand that, but yes. It does seem to suggest, though, that the government is doing something to try and bring back that particular girl. I mean, it may not be in the public domain, but they appear to be doing something.
they appear to be doing something. Again, I will speak as a Nigerian
Sure.
citizen, that what will make sense to us is those positive results. If they appear to be doing something and those things are not producing results, to us it is nothing.
No, I think you're right. I mean,
Yes.
for example, her family, I mean, all they want to see is their child
Just bring
back.
back
It's a
her.
bit like the electricity thing. You just want to switch on your light and it
Or
stays
switch it
on.
back on. The
You don't want to hear
internal
all the
workings,
stories
exactly.
around it.
And besides, we know that this is a sensitive security situation. We expect the government to communicate with us. Oh, yes, we are doing something and all of that. Don't jeopardize sensitive security information. But at the same time, we want, results or outcomes. I'll give you an example. When the news came out that Leah Sharibu may now have a child, her parents came out to say something. They said,
Yes.
whether she has a child or she doesn't have a child, just bring her back. That tells you what we are expecting. If we don't tie results to those actions, it means there's something we are still not getting right, even in those actions. Leah Sharibu has been in abduction for 2 years.
Do you think there's less attention focused on that particular incident? Because obviously when you had the Bring Back Our Girls issue, I mean, it was a global campaign, which, thanks to people like yourself, got a lot of attention even at the White House. Did you think there's much less, people are sort of fatigued by all that, all of that?
Sensibly, people will be fatigued. I mean, April 14 this year will make it exactly 6 years that we've been, talking about the Chibok girls. And it's sad that we are still even having to talk about it from the negative light. 2 years since Leah Sharibu's abduction, the fatigue that set in from that of the Chibok girls, tend to delve us into that of Leah Sharibu. Understandably, as humans. And then there was a dynamic at some point about how, okay, fine, you keep calling that this girl should be released or this Chibok girl should be released. But the last time 21 and 86 girls were released, there was heightened attack by the insurgents. And people came on us and attacked us that you call for the release of 100, 200, one girl on one hand, but you are not thinking of the ripple negative effect, the negative ripple effect of they come back, we pay ransom, and then these people have more funds, to do the stuff that they do. So we keep getting all of those backlash. So yes, fatigue was setting. But there was something you said about, the level of attention.
Yeah, briefly, we've got to take a break.
Leah Sharibu has, really gotten equal attention just as the Chibok girls.
Okay, please stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Bukky Shonibare, the campaigner for girls and women's rights in Nigeria. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, my guest today is the outstanding Bukky Shonibare, one of the key voices for girls and women's rights in Nigeria, and one of the most passionate and prominent advocates for justice in this country. As the founder and director of numerous rights organizations, and now additionally as a lawyer and female education advocate, it is not even possible to describe all her accomplishments in this program. Suffice it to say that with her amazing power for standing up for her beliefs, she's given hope to critical masses of people, getting many of them involved in trying to create a better world. We'll speak some more to Bukky in a moment. But first, here she is talking about the motivation behind the Bring Back Our Girls campaign.
It was going to beat humanity out of us if the Chibok girls stayed longer than we anticipated at the time. And to think that, you meet some of these mothers and some of these fathers, and there's just this inner desire to see what they want come to pass as quick as possible, so they don't have to wait for so long. So not me or anybody in the movement thought that those children should be made to stay longer than few days, especially because people had come out en masse to cry for them. I think some of them can still come back, but the chances that we would get all of them is slim. And if that happens, then it would really be a miracle.
And the indefatigable Bukky Shonibare is still with me in the studio. Very emotive for you, of course, when you talk about the Chibok girls. But what's the current state of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign? Has it effectively disbanded, or is it a sort of loose formation where sort of members get on with their lives but come together when there's a kind of women-related crisis?
I think it's a combination of the former and the latter description that you just gave. Even before we got into 5 years, by the time we were crossing 3 years, 4 years, a lot of members of the group has started, leaving the movement. And not because they became less passionate about the issues, but because, there's only so much that the art can take. Every time I have to talk about the Chibok girls, like, I really have to struggle holding myself back. And I can begin to delve into how much it has affected me emotionally. Not just because I'm a mother, but and I relate with the mother. You know when you talk to a mother and she's lamenting and not so coherent, but she's saying something that she just cannot find the words to express it. And it's not just me. I watch men, grown men, break down at the Unity Fountain and just cry and say, what if this was my daughter? I watch people come out for the campaign and say, I don't even know Chibok. I don't know the Northeast. I've not been anywhere there. But what if this was my daughter? People connected on the level of humanity, shared humanity. And I think it got to a point that, that strength began to wane. And I do not blame any.
People were emotionally exhausted.
Yes, emotionally exhausted. And that's because we kept calling for the same over and over again. We get pumped up in strength when we get maybe one girl escape or 21 girls released or something. But over time, especially with that gap between the last success story that we had and now, we've not heard anything about the Chibok girls for so long. One would understand, how, people started going. But I can tell you that at the Unity Fountain, there are still members who meet on a daily basis.
But I mean, would you say that looking back, that campaign failed to achieve what it set out to achieve?
No, I would not say that. I would say the campaign was successful. The extent to which it was successful can now be debated. Successful to the extent that we came out for one objective.
Partially successful.
Yes. The sheer fact that the world knows Chibok is a success. We had to get to a point, especially at the beginning of the campaign. I was saddled with the responsibility of developing the initial draft of the strategic plan of the movement. And one of the tedious tasks for me was defining what success would mean to us as a movement. And when I submitted the initial draft and the strategic team discussed it, we had to do a scenario building that what would success mean? Is it when all of the 219 girls are brought back? Is it when certain numbers of those girls are brought back or something? We agreed that when one girl comes back, it's a success. Beyond the fact that we have
quite a lot of girls who came back.
107 girls came back. 112 are still in abduction. We don't know their state. That we could get 107 girls is a success. One. Two, the fact that the Bring Back Our Girls advocacy opened the eyes of not just Nigerians, but the world to what was going on in the Northeast, which really people did not pay attention to. The extent of the insurgency that was going on, the extent of how insecure our schools are. I mean, I do things right now, and I'm sure we're going to delve into those things that I was never doing before. In terms of work that I'm doing, policies I'm shaping, campaigns that I'm involved in because of that unfortunate incident. I will wrap up that question by saying that there are moments that we must always latch on. What comes out of those moments defines success or failure. There was the Chibok girls moment. What did we achieve with that? And I think those things that I mentioned could actually be the success.
But you think that moment has passed?
I think that moment is still on, especially because we still have girls in abduction. We still have Leah Sharibu. And so long as we can have this conversation,
Sure.
That moment is still on. And we must keep latching on it to push for a broader agenda.
And talking about conversations, if you had the opportunity, knowing what you know and being a fervent and very honest campaigner, very well-respected campaigner, if you had the opportunity to speak to President Buhari today regarding the state of this country with particular focus on, you know, the Chibok girls, the Dapchi girls, girls and women's rights, what would you say to him?
I would say to the president to look at the situation of the Chibok girls and the many issues it brought out, opening the door to issues that needs to be dealt with, not just to prevent the reoccurrence of an abduction, but to deal with several other issues that came out because Chibok girls issue happened. And I think that if I'm able to speak to the president, I would do a mind map. I would do a mapping of the issues that came out as a result of Chibok girls. Issues around protection of schools, security and safety of schools, how well children are going to school, especially girl child
And you
education.
think schools are still unprotected?
I think schools are still unprotected. I'm currently on part of the legal team, part of a broader team, but specifically on the legal team, of those working on a security and safety of schools policy for Nigeria. And that came about because the Chibok girls issue happened. And it is basically to set minimum standards for the protection of schools, security and safety of schools, both public and private schools. So let me wrap up that question on the president to say, do a mind map. Nations don't just go through unfortunate situations. There are nations that are prosperous today in different areas, closing inequality gaps, you know, ensuring citizens' prosperity and so many things because there was an unfortunate situation. And we can talk about those revolutionary points. I think for women and girls in Nigeria and our school issue, the Chibok girls issue was a revolutionary point, and what we bring out of it, the result we bring out of it, because Chibok happens, would actually be a huge success for President Buhari.
Does the pressure of all this publicity get to you personally? Do you sometimes wish you could just live a quiet, peaceful, non-sort of confrontational life?
Yes. I think the aspect of my life, the perception that some people get about who I am as a person has been largely shaped by that advocacy. And, you know, not just generally in the public space, even at the family level, where activism is seen as confrontational, as fisty, as, you know, rude, brash, you know, and all of those negative connotations.
Unladylike, perhaps?
Unladylike, actually. And especially
are there
in
people who see it that way? I mean, it's not that way, but I mean...
There are people who see it that way. And, you know, especially when people align activism to the extent to which you are either a good wife or a good mother at home. For her to be going out like this and be standing in front of police and president, only God knows how she's talking to her husband at home. You know, those kind of dynamics that, you know, comes from, you know, cultural, traditional norms, and those kind of narratives that we have given women and girls. Emotionally, it has affected me. I am naturally a very private, sit-at-home book person, but this activism, you know, made people
it forced you to go into the public eye, into the eye of the storm, as it were.
Exactly.
And a lot of media attention all the time.
A lot of media attention. I don't mind the media attention, to be honest. And I don't mind, not because I want to be popular, but because I think
it draws attention to your cause.
Yes, and the more we can amplify the voices of those who are not necessarily voiceless, but who have voices that are really so low, and they need voices like ours to really amplify it. I became a little more emotional as a result of the advocacy. I cry more. And that's because I've been to Chibok a number of times. My first time in Chibok was a breaking moment for me. You know, sitting with the parents, sitting with them on the floor, listening to them, family, the friends, the boyfriends, the girlfriends, you know, who have lost friends, who no longer have playmates, you know, listening to them and relating to them, eating with them, going to the school, seeing where it happened. The military permitted me to enter the school, the rebuilding work that is going on. So it's brought out a part of me that I also didn't know existed.
Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about you, your personal life in a moment. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with the indomitable fighter for women's rights, Bukky Shonibare. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyagolu. Now, with her numerous campaigns focusing on women and girls, Bukky Shonibare is well known as a change maker, though much of what she does on a daily basis often goes unnoticed. She's probably most recognizable as one of the founders of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, and as a woman who is not afraid to speak her mind and to empower communities to make a change. But she's also an inspiration to many with her astonishing accomplishments in the field of education. She holds a first-class bachelor's degree in law, a first-class degree in business administration, a master's degree in managing peace and security in Africa, as well as dual certificates in journalism and creative writing. She's also received awards and recognitions from the World Economic Forum and the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria, and was named as the 2016 Mandela Washington Fellow, an initiative of the U.S. government. And the hugely accomplished Bukky Shonibare is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us. And I understand that you were a big fan of mathematics growing up. I mean, it makes me shudder because I couldn't stand maths. But I mean, that's very rare for a teenager. You had to solve inequalities and all about variables and values and all that sort of thing. I mean, what was it about it that attracted you?
So I love teaching. So while I was in secondary school, this is amazing. While I was in secondary school, a lot of my classmates had problems with mathematics.
I did.
so they would usually have problems with algebra, simultaneous equations, you know, and all of those things. By my personality, I try to solve problems. Even if I don't naturally have the solution, I go and learn the solution and I bring the solution.
Well, the mathematical way of solving problems is rather different, though,
exactly.
Isn't it?
So what I then started doing was to pay more attention in my mathematics class, do more extra lessons on myself, you know, learning math, because I want to, you know, make less people less agitated about mathematics. And, you know, sometimes we argue that the things we learn in school don't, you know, come to play in our normal life. But when I started dealing with issues around inequality...
Yeah, because I was going to ask you that. I mean, did that help you? Because I read somewhere that you applied that to the inequalities in Nigerian society. You kind of applied a mathematical way of trying to deal with the problem.
Exactly. So when you are dealing with inequalities in mathematics, you are dealing with constants and variables. And when I started doing all of this work, I had to ask myself, okay, so in this situation, what are the constant factors? What are the variable factors?
Yes.
And then you look at the constant factors sometimes as maybe root causes when you do the problem tree analysis. And those constant factors are there, which you may not necessarily have a lot of control over. You know, based on the position I am, either as an activist, you know, as an NGO owner, someone intervening. People at the higher level, for instance, at the government level, may be able to deal with those constant factors, change policies, bring laws into place. But the variables, they are the ones that you can always tweak and put around.
Sure.
And then I can solve those ones. So I realized that my knowledge in mathematics, you know, I bring it into play. And I didn't know that I was bringing in the knowledge of mathematics until, you know, I started engaging on these issues.
Tell us a bit about your personal story. What was it like growing up? Where did you grow up? Where are you from?
So, I'm Nigerian.
Well, no, I know
Nigerian.
But
I'm from the southwest of Nigeria. So I grew up in a home where and I won't bore you with too much of the story, but the part that really relates with the work that I do and where I am or what I do today. So I grew up waking up constantly to the far distant cries of my mom, trying tirelessly, sometimes unsuccessfully, to suppress, whatever was that she was going through. My dad would beat her, very flimsy issues. So I grew up as a young 12 years, 11 years, coming to the realization of really what was going on. And my mom would try to suppress it, and she won't talk about it. But it got to a point, I think she was beaten one day to a point of coma. And I realized that this woman is powerless. The only thing she could do was to cry. And she didn't want to leave because she wanted to stay because of us. Not just because of the societal belief that, oh, stay because of your children, but because she really wanted us to not have a disadvantaged life. And then, so that was the experience of my mom. In fact, it was my mom's experience that made me really want to be a lawyer. Because I started asking questions, and I realized that, oh, when you are a lawyer, you can fight for women like that. So that's number one. At 18 years old, I was sexually abused. I lost my virginity at 18 years old through a very brutal rape. And when I say brutal rape, it was with beating and slapping and everything. It happened on a 3-seater sofa. And I like to mention the 3-seater sofa to connect it to the Busola Dakolo issue. So when I heard of her abuse and how she was abused on a sofa.
And the Busola is the young woman who was allegedly raped by her pastor, when she was underage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So the moment I heard that one of those alleged rape happened on a sofa, it just took me back to October 8, 1998. I just could not forget the whole experience. Until date, I still remember, everything, the details of everything. And you almost do not get over those things. Those things shaped why, when the Chibok girls' abduction happened, I told myself that even though I couldn't fight on that sofa, this is an opportunity for me to fight. And if one girl can come back, then I won over the guy that actually took my virginity.
I'm deeply sorry for what happened to you, but how far would you say Nigeria has come in the fight against the oppression of women in this country, and how much is there still to achieve?
I think we've not come really far. The conversations around gender equality, violence against women and girls, and all those issues have been on for a long time. And I give kudos to those women's rights activists who have gone ahead of me and who have gone ahead of us, this generation that tend to be taking over this work. No, not taking over, continuing the work. When you look at the results of, for instance, female representation in government, or the cases of sexual abuse, molestation, they no longer even happen in corners or in private places. They now happen in open glare. Like, for instance, when you have a senator beating a woman, in open glare. I think the result it does not really correlate with a lot of the work that has been done. Nigeria is signatory to a lot of international instruments that guarantees human rights generally, and also guarantees women's rights. We are signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Maputo Protocol at the regional level. We also have our own national laws, the Violence Against Persons Prohibitions Act. We have even in the Constitution, some of these laws. And at state level, we have some of these. Nigeria is part of CEDAW, even though not a treaty, but that agreement, we are part of it. And we have our national action plans on it. When you look at the provisions and the rights that are guaranteed in it for women and girls, and you correlate it with you know, the evidence and the result that we have, you see that there are no alignment. We still have a long way to go. So we are not doing so well. The thing is, so we are now at a very critical stage. 2020 is critical for women. And I think Nigeria needs to latch on where we are right now. Nigeria will be 60 years this year. This year makes it exactly 20 years since the Resolution 1325. And by Resolution 1325, I'm referring to the UN Resolution 1325, which focuses on women, peace and security, particularly the importance of women's role in peace and peace building processes. When you look at that architecture at the national level, and even at the state level, we don't have many women participating. But when you go to the local level, we have groups, for instance, I just returned from the Southeast, and I hear of this particular group of women, Umwada community group, and then there are so many of those peace-building groups that they have. So we are not really doing so well, but this year is important. This year is 25 years since the Beijing Declaration of Action, and it's 20 years since 1325. And when we also look at the fact that Nigeria has dealt with certain internal conflicts, like the Civil War, 1967 to 1970. The Civil War, and I use the Civil War carefully because not just the Civil War, the Boko Haram insurgency and so many, we know that there are gender dynamics to these issues. Women are disproportionately affected. And that is furthered by the fact that we have existing norms and, you know, stuff that
and yet
really
lessons
suppress.
are not learned.
And yet lessons are not being learned. So we need to really, as we move forward, we cannot but look at where we are coming from.
And what's that got to do with the level of education in this country? Because, I mean, in many ways, you know, a lot of rural people, a lot of less well-educated people are more tolerant of that sort of thing, aren't they?
I think they are more tolerant of it because they do not even know that their rights are being violated. So yesterday I was in a meeting where we were discussing with some traditional leaders, and we started talking. No, let me not even use yesterday. Let me use an encounter that I had in Ebonyi State last week, and you know we're doing various clarification, and then we're discussing age of consent should be 18. So I was expecting a sweeping yes, age of consent should be 18. But there were certain people in the hall that actually said, no, age of consent should not be 18 because
it should be lower.
It should be lower. And when you hear the reasons, the reason is not a point for me to say, oh, why should you be thinking like that?
Briefly, because we have to take a break.
For me, it is mainly to understand where they are coming from. Oh, women get to menopause quickly now. Oh, girls cannot get married on time. So when you understand it from how they are thinking, it helps you know that until we get to the grassroots and customary level, we may not be able to deal with all of these issues.
Very instructive. Stay with us. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with one of the founders of the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, Bukky Shonibare. Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyagolu. Now, my guest today is Bukky Shonibare, a crusading, strong-minded woman who has left her mark on the campaign for girls and women's rights in Nigeria. In March 2018, she was named one of the 100 most inspiring women in Nigeria, doing more than most to try to improve civil rights in the country and to make it a kinder, fairer place. Today, at a pivotal moment in gender relations in Africa and beyond, she continues to inspire tens of thousands, even millions of girls and women across the country. The women's rights activist and human rights campaigner Bukky Shonibare is still with me in the studio. Thank you for staying with us.
Thank you.
Let me get you to wear, because I mean you've got so many hats. Let's face it. Although it doesn't deter from your focus, which is very central. But I mean, let me just sort of get you to wear your peace and security hat, for which you have, you know, strong qualifications, academic as well as experiential. Are you surprised that after so many years, the issue of Boko Haram and now ISWAP, which is Islamic State for West Africa, West Africa province, and the abduction of girls like Leah Sharibu are still at the heart of the security crisis in Nigeria?
I am surprised, actually. Nigeria has the capacity to do an in-depth conflict analysis. And the essence of conflict analysis is not just to understand conflict, within a particular context, but to also be able to identify the root causes, the proximate causes, and how they manifest, as consequences. And you want to be able to deal with issues at those different levels. While the manifestations will help you, and when I say manifestations, I'm referring to consequences, the leaves of the tree. While they will expose areas that can help us achieve quick wins when they are dealt with. So, for instance, a consequence may be girls that go through a particular path are usually abused. So we put street lights there, and then we put security there. But that is a consequence of something deeper, something proximate and then something deeper. And Nigeria has that capacity. Painfully, we are not harnessing this capacity. But beyond harnessing, we are not coordinating. There are so many peace and security experts in Nigeria. And it's sad that even sometimes you have people from the international scene coming to Nigeria to be expert on Nigeria's issues, where we have experts on Nigerian issues that are experts, that are Nigerians who have gone on the field and know these things. I think we still have a problem of coordination, bringing all of this together, understanding what the context is and what the issues is, and begin to deal with them. If you have a situation where young people are unemployed, you know that it is only a matter of time. It's a ticking time bomb. We will deal with crime and criminalities. They will be susceptible to being conscripted by groups like Boko Haram and all of that. And we are not dealing with that. We're simply waiting for the consequences to happen.
So is it your sense that the method that's being employed, because you're suggesting that the capacity to deal with it is there? Because if you look, for example, Nigeria, although, as you pointed out earlier, it's a different type of conflict, but Nigeria helps to restore democracy, end the civil wars in Liberia, Sierra Leone, that sort of thing, for which it was hugely commended. A very well-respected peacekeeper. But it doesn't seem to be able to figure out what to do in its own country.
Yes, so I think it's one, the issue of capacity. It's another, now to answer your question, there are other factors, that are enabling factors that even when we have the capacity and we harness that capacity and there's coordination, but because we have these constant variable, constant factors, whatever you build on it will actually not stand. So in law, we say you can't build something on nothing and expect it to stand. So if we are coming with these strategies, these ideas, these methods, either that we have applied in countries like Liberia or other peacekeeping missions that we have, and we cannot apply it here. Do we want to do a comparison of the factors, the enabling factors that makes those places successful? Yet we don't have such factors.
Although it took them many years before their wars ended.
Exactly. So I think we need to look at it holistically. And when we are looking at it holistically, we are not looking at it holistically and dealing with them politically. We have to deal with them simply because this is what we hold the people that we say we govern.
Right.
So in closing on that question, I think Nigeria's 60 years, October 1st is just around the corner. Nigeria's 60 years provides an opportunity for us to do an in-depth analysis and have in-depth conversations on where are we now. And there's no how we can talk about where Nigeria is right now without talking about the peace and security landscape of the country.
But of course, based on your analysis that you've just done, it just does not seem like the fight that you have fought and continue to fight is going to end anytime soon. In other words, from all sides, it's not just the women and girls sort of issue. It's also peace and security. Just ordinary citizens, men and women, civilians going about their business. it's not going to end anytime soon, is it?
It doesn't look like it will end anytime soon. I mean, look at the landscape. We keep reacting to issues. We keep, we are not seeing. There are certain things that the people see, and when I say the people, I mean the governed, the citizens, that helps us know that work is being done. But beyond the work is being done, that helps us know where to plug in and contribute our quota as a people. What you see right now is citizens, either individually or through their organizations, identify issues and we're just dealing with them. But we are not connecting it to a bigger, broader vision. And that vision can only be defined and designed by the government, so that non-governmental organizations, individuals, people from the members of the international community can plug into that. But because we are not doing that, we just keep going around the circles. There is nothing right now that is evidential of something forward moving. At the international level, however, the Sustainable Development Goals provides a sense of where everyone should be going. I would expect that Nigeria should have its own version of goals, one of which should include issues around peace and security.
But given that it doesn't appear to be doing that, you're continuing your life essentially as a campaigner and an activist, but there's some cost there,
yes,
hasn't there? I mean, on a personal level, the stability of your own life, your home, perhaps even your marriage. Has it been worth it?
So the cost has been so enormous that I shy away from talking about it. And maybe I shy away from talking about it because I'm refusing to accept that there would be cost to doing something so altruistic, and something that you expect that shouldn't have certain consequences. I've lost friends because I'm doing this. I've lost very important relationships because I am doing this, because of a certain perception of an activist, or because of a certain perception of someone that does this kind of work. So yes, there has been cost, but despite the fact that there has been cost, there has also been positives as well. And the positives get me going. I cry, I have sleepless nights sometimes when I think of the cost. But I realize that the positives, tend to carry me on. At the beginning of Bring Back Our Girls campaign, there was threat to life. With the Church Me Too movement, and the campaign to Koza Church, there were a lot of threats to my life, a lot coming from pastors. There were curses, people, just dishing out curses to say, oh, you want to bring down the church, you are allowing jihadists to use you to bring down the church, and all of so people have all of those kind of perceptions. But
as Maya Angelou said, still I thrive.
Still I rise, and still I thrive.
Absolutely.
And one more thing, as Maya Angelou also said, she said, I come as one, but I stand as 10,000. And that's the way I see my life in all of this. I come as Bukky Shonibare, but I stand for Leah Sharibu, I stand for 102 Chibok girls, and I stand for so many other people whose voice needs to be amplified.
Bukky Shonibare, we're deeply grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's it for this edition of the Arise interview. Do join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.